There's two ways to draw classically. There's the format where you break out the shapes, so you would draw this as a triangle, that as a rectangle, and you would construct the figure that way. But the much more common classical method that you'll find in bark plates and things like that where this pose is from is what's called a plumb line. And that's simply a line that runs right down the figure and lines up the various features. That's important to know because we're going to look at what most people call gesture drawing, and it's actually using a modified plumb line. Now, what do I mean by a modified plumb line? I mean something that's probably familiar to you as an action line. So a modified plumb line would go like that. You've taken the same basic system, but this time you're following the action. Now that's used so that you can match everything up with this line of action that you've chosen. So you can set a cross example with it, and you'd meant the figure to be a really strong cross, and you put all the focus on his belly. You can line up the contours against this action line, so the figure very strongly shoots in the direction you want him to go. But the thing is, that's not gesture drawing, that's the same plumb line, but you've changed it. Even if you just take it and say the man was doing something really fancy, like twisting and turning, and you end up with an action line like that, it's still a plumb line. And you're going to use contours to drive the action against this plumb line. Now, why is this such an important thing to be a stickler about? This is a very plumb line based character. The way this was drawn was, there was a plumb line running through the figure, and the contour lines, that is all the lines on the outside of the figure, they quickly match up with it, and you get the basic outline of the figure. It's a very outward focused expression, but if you notice, as I'm sitting here knocking everything back to its pure contour, it is a very boxy method of drawing. Everything can be very accurate with plumb lines, but it's not going to look very alive. If you look at realist drawings, which really use this system, they tend to have kind of a dead aspect to them. Now, the plumb line's great for learning your proportions, for your anatomical accuracy, and it's really the only way to train your eye. But gesture does something completely different than this system. Now, a couple things about this pose that'll give you kind of why gesture works is, if you notice, that shoulder is really far back. Now, part of gesture is feeling it in and of yourself when you draw the pose. So imagine your arm is like that. You'll feel the tension going through your chest. You'll feel your back tense up. And you'll feel what has to happen to this other shoulder. It kind of gets pulled forward as the other gets back. But if you notice here, in this drawing, it's rather flat. You also see these legs here, how they're shooting straight up and down, and the belly's kind of got a weird arch. You wouldn't necessarily do that with the small of your back that would be carrying all the weight of your torso. So with a gesture drawing, what you're trying to draw is not the contours, and you're not trying to draw the line of action. What you're trying to draw is the feeling, the placement, and the action within the muscles. So Nicolaides, when he came up with the system, would tell you to put your pencil, pen to the paper, hold it, no picking it up, no picking it up, and you are going to move up and down through the character, trying to feel the way that the pose feels. So and you never start with the head with these things. You just start somewhere kind of arbitrary and you move through it. So we're going to do it for 30 seconds, trying to feel, and it's going to be a little synthetic because I'm going to tell you what I'm trying to feel as I feel it. So we come through. We've got to keep moving up and down. We know there's strength in those legs. We feel this other strength in the legs. That one's got a little bit more of the weight to it. That's coming up. Ooh, we're up there. That shoulder's kind of jutting forward, so I feel it coming forward. It comes around. I feel that forearm getting nice and tense, especially that muscle in there. But that elbow, it's sticking out through the skin. And this one, it's whipping back. It's whipping back and it's pulling that torso with it. And I feel that those abs are nice and tight, and it's coming up through the neck, and it's pulling it up, and I notice that chin is kind of jutting out a little bit more than it should there, and it's filling through, and it is fully. Now the first thing you should notice is this is really, really ugly. That's rule number one of contour drawings. Of gesture drawings, is you do them and then you basically throw them out. Now the question is though, why should you do a bunch of nonsense drawings? A lot of you are probably sitting there thinking, I draw a lot of nonsense anyways. I don't need to draw a whole bunch of scribble lines and call that practice. Now, the real reason this is going on is because Nicolaides gesture drawing is part of a system. You might have heard of blind contour drawing, where you stick your hand down and without looking, you try to draw it and you end up with really weird squiggly lines. Gesture is part of a system. The first thing you would do is you'd feel the gesture. So there's the body, there's the arms going up and down. And you do try to feel it in space as you do it. There's the legs coming down in the pose. The legs coming down, she's got her hands in between there. And you look at that and you're like, that doesn't really look like much of anything. But gesture drawing works and is done because the next step you would do is you would take a piece of tracing paper, and in the next step over your gesture drawing, you would do a contour drawing, and you combined your gesture with your blind contour to end up with a picture. And then this represents the third step in the system, where you do what's called a model drawing, something that's a little different and probably its own video. So gesture drawing, the main thing about it is to feel the figure. And that's why a lot of modern teachers still use the term. But the tendency for students is they look at this as something that, okay, I drew it, now I'm gonna just get on to the real drawing and use that as a base of an underline. And if that's the only thing you think of when you do it, you're going to find yourself going back to the old plumb line and making measurements, and that gesture's just going to serve as like a 30-second exercise of wasted time.